Before we begin, make sure you have your guided notes ready. Today we're focusing on the causes of World War II. This is not just about memorizing events. It's about understanding how political decisions, economic crises, and imperial ambitions combine to create global conflict. As we go through this, think about patterns, especially how instability creates opportunities for new leaders and aggressive policies. Our learning objective is to explain the causes and consequences of World War II. Key causes include the unsustainable peace settlement after World War I, the Great Depression, imperialist aspirations, and the rise of fascist and totalitarian regimes. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially brought an end to World War I, but it also created many of the underlying conditions that would eventually lead to World War II. Under the terms of the treaty, Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for the war and faced a series of harsh penalties. These included heavy financial reparations, significant territorial losses, and strict limitations on its military. As a result, Germany's economy struggled severely, with rising inflation, widespread unemployment, and long-term instability that affected everyday life for millions of people. However, the impact of the treaty went beyond just economics. Many Germans viewed the Treaty of Versailles as deeply unfair and humiliating. It was often referred to as a quote-quote peace, and it created a strong sense of resentment toward both the Allied powers and Germany's own leaders who had agreed to its terms. This widespread frustration and anger created an environment where extremist political ideas could take hold. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to gain support by promising to overturn the treaty, restore Germany's national pride, and rebuild its military and economy. So, while the Treaty of Versailles was intended to create lasting peace after World War I, it instead contributed to instability and helped lay the foundation for future conflict. The Great Depression, which began in 1929, was a global economic crisis that had significant political consequences across many countries. As economies collapsed, unemployment rose dramatically, and millions of people experienced poverty and uncertainty. In many cases, democratic governments struggled to respond effectively to these challenges, which led to a loss of public confidence in traditional political systems. As people became increasingly frustrated, they began to support leaders who promised quick and decisive solutions. In Germany, Adolf Hitler gained support by offering economic recovery, job creation, and a renewed sense of national strength. In Italy, Benito Mussolini promoted stability, order, and national revival. These leaders used the crisis to justify greater control over government and society, often weakening or eliminating democratic institutions in the process. In this way, the Great Depression did not just impact economies, it also reshaped political systems and contributed directly to the rise of authoritarian regimes. During the interwar period, several totalitarian leaders rose to power by taking advantage of instability and public dissatisfaction. In Italy, Benito Mussolini positioned himself as a strong leader who could restore national pride and create a more powerful and unified state. In Spain, Francisco Franco came to power during a civil war, presenting himself as a figure who could bring order and stability. In Germany, Adolf Hitler used both economic hardship and resentment from the Treaty of Versailles to build support for the Nazi Party. In each of these cases, these leaders gained power by appealing to fear, frustration, and a desire for change. They often promised strength, unity, and national revival, but in doing so, they replaced democratic systems with authoritarian rule. This shift in leadership played a major role in increasing tensions and setting the stage for global conflict. Japan's expansion in the early 20th century was largely driven by economic needs and a desire for greater security and influence. As an island nation with limited natural resources, Japan looked outward to secure access to raw materials and markets. This led to increased interest in expanding its influence across East Asia. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, a region in northeastern China that was rich in natural resources and strategically important. This invasion marked the beginning of Japan's aggressive expansion in the region. Rather than facing strong consequences, Japan was able to maintain control, which encouraged further expansion. This pattern of expansion, combined with limited international response, contributed to rising tensions in Asia and played a key role in the lead-up to World War II. Japan justified its expansion through the idea of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. This concept was presented as a system in which Asian nations would work together for mutual benefit and free themselves from Western imperial control. Japan positioned itself as the leader of this movement, claiming it would guide the region toward economic cooperation and shared prosperity. However, the reality was very different from this idealized vision. In practice, the co-prosperity sphere allowed Japan to expand its control, access valuable resources, and establish dominance over other countries in the region. Rather than cooperation, many of these areas experienced exploitation, forced labor, and loss of autonomy. This contrast between the stated goals and actual outcomes highlights how imperial powers often use the language of unity and liberation to justify expansion and control. Propaganda played an important role in supporting Japan's expansionist goals. The image shown on this slide promotes unity between Japan, China, and Manchukuo, presenting the idea that these regions could work together to create peace and stability. This type of messaging was designed to influence both international and domestic audiences. For international viewers, it suggested that Japan was acting as a stabilizing force in the region. For Japanese citizens, it reinforced the idea that expansion was justified and beneficial. However, the reality on the ground was very different, as many regions under Japanese control experienced exploitation and harsh conditions. This demonstrates how propaganda can shape perception and justify political actions, even when those actions involve aggression and control. Italy's expansion during this period was influenced by dissatisfaction with the outcome of World War I. Although Italy was on the winning side, many Italians felt that they had not received the territory or recognition they deserved. Benito Mussolini used this frustration to promote expansion and build support for his leadership. He aimed to create a new Roman Empire that would restore Italy's power and prestige. This led to aggressive actions, particularly in Africa, as Italy sought to expand its influence and demonstrate its strength. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, one of the few remaining independent countries in Africa. This invasion was motivated by a desire for expansion, as well as a desire to restore national pride after Italy's earlier defeat by Ethiopia. The League of Nations responded by imposing economic sanctions, but these measures were limited and ineffective. Major powers like Britain and France were hesitant to take stronger action, as they wanted to avoid escalating tensions. This weak response demonstrated that the League lacked the ability to enforce peace, which encouraged further aggression by other countries. As Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany, expansion became a central goal of Nazi foreign policy. One of the key ideas driving this expansion was the concept of Lebensraum, or living space. Hitler believed that Germany needed more land in order to support its growing population, and to become a stronger, more self-sufficient nation. This expansion was largely focused on Eastern Europe, which the Nazis viewed as both strategically valuable and racially desirable, according to their ideology. In addition to this, Hitler was determined to reverse the effects of the Treaty of Versailles. He aimed to rebuild Germany's military, reclaim lost territory, and restore the country's position as a major global power. Nazi racial ideology also played a significant role. The Nazis believed in the superiority of the so-called Aryan race, and used this belief to justify expansion, conquest, and control over other populations. So German expansion was not just about land, it was about power, ideology, and rewriting the outcomes of World War I. This slide shows the progression of Germany's expansion leading up to World War II. Rather than one sudden action, Hitler expanded step by step, gradually increasing Germany's territory and influence. Each move tested the response of other countries, particularly Britain and France. What's important to notice is that these actions were not immediately stopped. Instead, many were met with hesitation or attempts to avoid conflict. This pattern created a situation where each successful expansion encouraged further aggression. In other words, the lack of strong international response played a key role in allowing Germany to continue expanding. As we go through the next few examples, think about how each step builds on the previous one. In 1936, Hitler made a bold move by remilitarizing the Rhineland. This region, located along Germany's western border, had been designated as a demilitarized zone under the Treaty of Versailles. This meant that Germany was not allowed to place military forces there. By sending troops into the Rhineland, Hitler was directly violating the treaty. This was a risky decision. At the time, Germany's military was not strong enough to withstand a full-scale conflict if other countries had responded. However, Britain and France chose not to take military action. This lack of response was significant. It showed Hitler that the Treaty of Versailles would not be enforced and that other nations were unwilling to confront Germany directly. As a result, this success encouraged further expansion and increased Hitler's confidence moving forward. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria in an event known as the Anschluss. Hitler justified this action by claiming that he was uniting all German-speaking people into one nation. This idea of unity appealed to many people in both Germany and Austria. However, the annexation also had important strategic and economic benefits. It increased Germany's population, expanded its territory, and provided access to additional resources. Like the remilitarization of the Rhineland, this action violated international agreements. Once again, there was little meaningful response from other countries. This continued pattern of inaction reinforced the idea that Germany could expand without facing serious consequences. Each step made the next one easier. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the official beginning of World War II. To justify the invasion, Germany staged an incident and blamed Poland for aggression. This created a false pretext for military action. Germany then launched a rapid and coordinated attack, using a strategy known as blitzkrieg, or lightning war. This approach combined fast-moving ground forces with air support to overwhelm the enemy quickly. At the same time, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east as part of a secret agreement with Germany. This agreement, known as the Nazi-Soviet Pact, allowed both countries to divide Poland between them. In response to the invasion, Britain and France declared war on Germany. However, their initial response was limited, and Poland was quickly defeated. This moment officially marks the start of World War II in Europe. To wrap up, these are the major ideas you should understand for this topic. First, the Treaty of Versailles and the Great Depression created widespread instability, both economically and politically. These conditions made it easier for extremist leaders to gain support. Second, totalitarian leaders in countries like Germany, Italy, and Japan used this instability to rise to power and promote aggressive, expansionist policies. Third, expansion by these countries was often met with weak or delayed responses from the international community, especially from organizations like the League of Nations. Finally, all of these factors, economic hardship, political instability, aggressive leadership, and lack of enforcement, combined to create the conditions that led to World War II. As you review this topic, focus on how these causes are connected and how they build on one another over time.